Silence. This is the first thing you hear when hope dies. Not a scream, not an explosion, not a plea for help, but silence. Silence. This is the first thing you hear when hope dies. Not a scream, not an explosion, not a plea for help, but silence. In silence, there is no malice, no pity. It simply exists. Most people fear the silence of extreme situations. They start filling it with thoughts of rescue. They look at the horizon. They wait. But in a world where the air temperature is minus 40 degrees, waiting is a slow form of suicide. Hope is a feeling, but survival is physics. Today we'll examine the story of two people who understood this too late to be afraid, but in time to live. This is not a story about a miracle. This is a blueprint of human perseverance. Imagine a place where the land doesn't belong to humans. The Arctic tundra at the border of Greenland and Canada. Here the wind always blows. Here the sun is just a pale spot behind clouds that doesn't warm, only illuminates your death. At this coordinate point, a plane crashed. A transport aircraft carrying equipment cargo. It didn't explode in the air. It hit the snow and broke into pieces, like a giant metal animal that stopped breathing. Inside were two people, Max and Alex. They weren't action movie heroes. They weren't extreme sports athletes. Max worked as a dispatcher in military aviation. Alex was a mechanical engineer. Ordinary people, but their professional deformation saved their lives. When the plane stopped, they had minutes before the cold started penetrating the cabin. A normal person's reaction in such a moment, shock, stupor. The question, why us? Or a frantic phone search to call someone who can no longer answer. Max didn't ask a single question. He didn't look at the sky searching for rescuers. He looked at his hands, then at the tools lying nearby. In aviation, there's a rule. When the system fails, you don't panic. You switch to the backup scheme. For Max, this backup wasn't a parachute or a radio. The backup was his mind. Max's first action became the foundation of their survival. He took out a notebook. It was empty except for the first pages with flight technical data. He turned the page and wrote the date, time, temperature. This seems like a small thing, but in chaos, recording data is an act of asserting control. As long as you're recording facts, you're not surrendering to emotions. Emotions burn energy. Facts preserve it. Max understood one thing. They weren't passengers of this catastrophe anymore. They were now employees of a new company. The company is called Survival, and it has no HR department. There's only the logistics department. Image prompt. Alex, the engineer, started with materials inventory. Most people in a survival situation count food. How many canned goods do we have? This is a beginner's mistake. Food will run out in a week. Max and Alex counted tools. They had a set of wrenches, a spool of copper wire, a canister of aviation fuel, debris of aluminum wing skin, nylon from life vests. Alex looked at these objects not as trash. He saw potential. Aluminum can be melted. Fuel can burn. Wire can hold. They weren't looking for food in the snow. They were looking for ways to create tools that would get food. The first night was the most dangerous. The wind was strengthening, temperature dropping. Alex suggested they immediately start building a raft. Water is nearby, he said. We can sail away from here. Max stopped him. This was a critical moment. If they had followed the impulse, they would have died. A raft without strength is a coffin on water. If you freeze today, you won't need a raft tomorrow. Max set priorities. First, heat. Second, shelter. Third, water. Fourth, food. Fifth, transport. They spent the first 3 days not on escape. They spent them making their sleeping place safe. They built shelter from fuselage parts. This wasn't just somewhere to sleep. This was an engineering construction. They used airplane seats as floor insulation. Cold comes from the ground. Any builder knows this. They raised the floor above the snow. They made ventilation so carbon monoxide from the burner wouldn't kill them in their sleep. Every detail was thought through. They didn't save time on base construction. They understood. The base is their only fulcrum point. If they lose it, they lose everything. This is military logistics principle. Don't start an offensive without securing your rear. On the fourth day, the real battle began. Not with nature, with themselves. Cold and isolation press on the psyche. Time loses meaning. Day mixes with night. A person starts turning into an animal. Literally. Alex stopped taking care of himself. His clothes became dirty. He stopped combing his hair. He only wanted to sleep and stay warm. Max saw danger in this. Not physical, but mental. When a person stops caring about their appearance, they stop caring about their decisions. Dirt is a signal to the brain. We've surrendered. We're victims. Max made Alex shave. They had no razor. They used a polished aluminum shard as a mirror and a dull knife. It was painful. It was uncomfortable. Alex resisted. Why? We're in the wilderness. No one sees us. Max answered with a phrase that became their motto. We see ourselves. And if we look like animals, we'll start thinking like animals. Animals die first. Humans survive. This ritual became an anchor. Every morning, they groomed themselves. They made their beds from dry moss. They maintained hygiene. This wasn't vanity. This was maintaining standards. They introduced a daily schedule. Wake up at the same time. Meals on schedule even when not hungry. Work in shifts. One sleeps, another keeps watch. This created time structure. In isolation, time can dissolve personality. Daily routine doesn't let time dissolve you. You know it's 8 a.m., so check shelter fastenings. It's 12 p.m., so melt snow. It's 8 p.m., so write in the diary. This structure gave them a sense of normalcy. They weren't refugees in their own home. They were operators of a complex system. But heat required fuel. Aviation fuel burned too fast and dangerously. They needed controlled fire. Alex suggested an idea that seemed crazy. Build a furnace. A real forge. To melt aluminum. Why? To make parts. Not for beauty. For strengthening the raft. They couldn't just tie logs together. They needed metal brackets, rings, fasteners, wooden water swells and brakes, metal holds. But to get metal, you need to melt the airplane skin. They built a furnace from stones and clay they found by the stream. It was primitive, but it worked. They used wicks from clothing soaked in fuel. Aluminum melting temperature is about 600 degrees Celsius. They needed to heat the furnace to this level. This required constant blowing. They made bellows from leather and dense fabric. This was hard work. One pumps the bellows, another monitors temperature. A mistake and the metal will freeze in the wrong shape. A mistake and the fuel will explode. Imagine the smell of this place. Burning, scorched fabric, metal, sweat. The sound of melting aluminum is a hiss like a snake's breath. When they first saw liquid metal in their mold, they didn't celebrate. They checked the casting quality. Any bubbles? Any cracks? This was the moment of truth. They weren't just surviving. They were manufacturing. They were turning death debris into a life tool. This mindset change is critically important. A victim waits for help. A creator makes tools. Over 2 weeks, they cast dozens of parts. Brackets for log fastening, rings for ropes, blades for tools. Every item was tested for strength. Alex hit them with a stone. If a part broke, it went for remelting. They didn't allow defects. In a store, you can buy a new part. Here, a defect costs life. This quality standard became their protection. They knew, if they made it, it would withstand. This gave confidence. Confidence reduced stress level. Less stress, fewer mistakes. The raft was ready in a month. This wasn't just a bundle of logs. This was a vessel. It had a reinforced bottom. It had a sail from wing fabric remnants. It had a steering system. They could go against the wind. They could hold course. But then a new problem arose. Resources. The raft was heavy. It required huge food and water supplies for a long journey to populated areas. They didn't have that much food. The calculation showed the raft would hold 2 people, but supplies would only last 1 person for a long transition to populated areas. This was the moment where most stories break down. Drama. Conflict. Who will sail? Who will stay? But Max and Alex didn't play emotions. They sat down and calculated. Cold calculation. Who is more efficient at rowing? Who navigates better? Who eats less? They assessed their physical parameters. They assessed skills. This wasn't betrayal. This was survival system optimization. If 2 people sail with half supplies, both die. If 1 person sails with full supplies, there's a chance. But they found a third solution. They recalculated the route. Alex found a shorter path along the coastline. There were chances to find Inuit settlements or fishing camps there. This increased the risk of meeting ice, but shortened travel time by 4 days. They had 4 days of food. They decided to sail together, but with a condition: strict economy. Half rations. No extra water. No rest without necessity. They turned themselves into mechanisms. Calorie consumption had to equal energy output. Balance. The start was quiet. No hooray shouts. No tears. They just pushed off from shore. The water was black and oily. Cold penetrated even through clothes. The first hours passed in tension. They checked every knot, every pole. The raft creaked, but held. The metal brackets they cast in the furnace worked. They didn't burst under load. Engineering calculation was confirmed by practice. This gave strength to row further. On the 3rd day, a storm began. Waves were higher than the raft. Water flooded the deck. They bailed water with buckets made from canisters. Hands went numb. Faces covered with ice. In such moments, you want to drop the oars. You want to lie down and wait for the end. But the discipline developed over a month and shelter worked. Max commanded. Alex executed. They didn't discuss fear. They discussed rowing technique. Left. Harder. Hold rhythm. They turned the fight with death into work. In the storm's peak, 1 main log cracked. The wave impact was too strong. If not for the metal bracket they cast in the forge, the raft would have broken apart instantly. The bracket held the wood together. This was the moment when their labor paid off. That month when they could have built a simple raft, but chose the hard path with reinforcement. That month when they could have not shaved, but maintained hygiene. It all came together at one point. Their system withstood the load. The storm ended as suddenly as it began. They were exhausted. They hadn't slept for 2 days. But land appeared on the horizon. Not ice. Land. Dark rock. They didn't know where this was, but it was solid ground. They approached the shore. The raft fell apart immediately after landing. It performed its function. It was expendable material.